my friend got accepted to Georgia Tech, and we YouTube Georgia Tech. The first thing that came up was commencement ceremony. And commencement ceremonies are not something fun to watch, right? We were mesmerized. We watched it. And I was thinking, can I be an attendee in that ceremony one day? Like just sit maybe up there somewhere and watch it close by. 7 years later, I'm sitting at a podium. Not only got my PhD degree, but also, giving a commencement speech.
Welcome back. Today's guest is Nassir Mokarram. He's the co-founder and inventor behind Xfade Bioscience, executive director of Emory Biofoundry Institute, and director of investments venture capital at Emory Investment Management. Based in Atlanta, Nassir is passionate about unlocking the untapped potential of the region and rethinking how leadership can drive change across sectors. Now, I love this episode. We went very much off script. We talked about some controversial topics, such as a little bit of diversity, equity, inclusion, a little bit about pay rates and things in universities, as well as how can we drive more research out of the lab into that real world impact and some of our ideas. We also talked about whether or not you should name your chat GPT and if you should type to it or talk to it. Okay, we had so much fun. I really hope you enjoy it. So welcome to this week's episode of the Badass Leaders Podcast, where I, Angela Gill Nelms, sit down with industry experts for candid conversations about the challenges and joys of leadership. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now let's dive in and get ready to scale your company, grow your brand, and unlock your full badass potential. Why don't you kick us off and introduce yourself to the audience and tell us why you're here today?
Sure. Nassir Mokarram. The reason that I'm here is because you invited me. and I appreciate that. Right now, I am the director of venture investments at Emory Endowment. Before that, I was a faculty. Still, I'm a faculty with the Department of Neurosurgery. I'm not a neurosurgeon, PhD in biomedical engineering and material science. Before that, I started a company around a medical device technology for treating brain tumors. Before that, I was in Bay Area and Stanford. Before that, I was at Georgia Tech. Hence the pin you see here was honor and privilege. A few years ago, I got a recognition, 40 under 40 at Georgia Tech, and we had a reunion a few nights ago. So they gave me a new pin. So I thought, I should wear it today.
Well, I love biomedical engineering and I love Georgia Tech.
I know.
And so it is so appropriate and on par. So we met first when I jumped in to take the role of Biolocity at Georgia Tech and Emory. And we immediately connected because I think we could both see that we were similar, like-minded individuals about just commercialization, entrepreneurship, Atlanta, Georgia Tech, Emory, all things that are advancing science and getting that technology to the patients, to the clinicians where it needs to be instead of keeping it in the lab bench. So I want to kick off then and say, okay, you are tackling one of the deadliest cancers with an idea that sounds almost science fiction, using a device to literally redirect tumors. For those who don't know your story yet, and they will by the end of this episode, what was the moment that convinced you this was worth dedicating your time to?
Because somebody told me it's our generation moon landing, and that's exciting. So for GBM, unfortunately, I don't know how much you know, it's one of the toughest cancers.
And tell the audience what GBM stands for.
GBM, glioblastoma multiforme, is the most aggressive malignant form of brain tumors. Around 13 to 15,000 patients in the U.S. That's the incidence rate. And unfortunately, they passed very quickly, within 12 to 15 months. In fact, I found a quote from this neurosurgeon in 1926 that the median survival time was 12 months. It's 15 months now, almost 100 years later.
Wow.
So imagine,
that was in what year was that?
1926.
1926.
It was a 12. So it's an interesting quote. I have it in my deck and just very first few slides because it shows, how little has been done. And it's there are reasons, and I don't want to get too technical about
Right.
that, but basically it's really hard to take the tumor out. Also, there's this thing called blood-brain barrier, so drugs don't get to tumor easily. And the tumor is very heterogeneous in its nature, so it changes and evolves. So you throw a drug at it, and then it will change and become a new malignancy or a different subtype of tumor grow. So all the patients would get some sort of recurrence. That's 100% etiology of death, unfortunately. So it's one of those things that you need to think outside of the box and figure out a way to do it in totally different way, because nothing has worked. And our idea, it wasn't just my idea, it was a lab that I was involved with at Georgia Tech, and a lot of brilliant people that did this much better than me. I got involved at the later stages. But the scientific component of it is, instead of killing or halting tumor migration, can we guide tumor migration and make the acute fatal disease more of a chronic disease? So that's in principle what we want to do. And there are different methods to do that. It turns out there is a method to madness of tumor migration. It doesn't go everywhere, especially for brain tumors. It uses a structure that called corpus callosum that connects your two hemispheres to each other. It finds that bridge to go from one hemisphere to another hemisphere just to expand.
Spreads.
There are features in that corpus callosum that we can mimic in a bioengineering way that will lower brain tumors to come inside our device by its own volition, and the other end of the device is outside of the brain. So instead of surgeon going to the tumor comes to surgeon, and you can use it for direct therapeutic benefit. That's a paper we published years ago. But more recently, we are advocating to be used as a continuous sampling device. So you can have access to brain tumor through a subcutaneous needle tap puncture, and analyze what's happening with tumor depending on the treatment.
So is it like giving. A port, or?
It's very similar to a port. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then by doing the subcutaneous, like it's a port that's in there. So the subcutaneous, so that's how it's getting, like you're not just doing subcutaneous on your forehead. You know what I mean?
That's
like
right.
Through the skull and through that to actually get to where the tissue
That's right.
and where the tumor is.
So there's a reservoir that sits in your skull, and there's a catheter that goes all the way. Distal end is close to proximity of tumor. So tumor starts coming inside the device, crawl inside the catheter, accumulate inside the reservoir, and then you can get access to the reservoir through a scalp.
Oh, wow. That's super fun. Okay. You know, the engineering person of me is like, now I want to see it all. So
yes.
Okay. I have to pull up your website afterwards.
No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And very simple. We were very deliberate about designing it to not, because the idea is so out there. We thought, let's make this to look actually similar to what other neurosurgeons see during daily operations. So if you give it to a surgeon, they would think that they know this device, and it's very similar looking.
Like a hydrocephalus
to
shunt?
Omae reservoir, Meitke reservoir, those kind of shunt catheters generally. The secret sauce is inside, which is not really visible, but the structure inside the device is different from your normal catheter.
I see. So where are you in the regulatory journey?
Actually, we might come back to this story because everything else that I've done during the last 10 years has to do with that journey that I took with that device. How to get from that scientific publishing in Nature materials discovery, that's what you want as a academician, researcher.
Exactly.
Like you hit it, right? What do you want to do after that? And there's all things that needs to happen with translation. And so that's a journey that I took. It kind of formed my mental framework for doing a bunch of other things that I'm doing, which I mentioned in the beginning. And we can connect the dots there, because some people look at those and say, what's happening? There's just so much, but they are all connected in my head. But to answer your question, it was a very interesting process because we got a very generous philanthropic support from Marcus Foundation.
Okay.
Very early on after we published the paper. And money was not the only thing we needed. We needed to figure out actually how to do this. And developing a medical device from that discovery stage to get to human It's really fascinating, multifaceted. That's why I spent a little bit of time in Bay Area. I was in a domain of not knowing what I don't know, and now I know what I don't know. So I have at least connections and people that can help me with that process. Right now, after a few years of working, it's actually in clinical trials. So it's been implanted in 2 patients.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Very exciting, amazing safety data. We are seeing some
I hope you
signal.
saved
Yeah.
like the box and all of that and the surgeon's signature from that first implant. No.
No, that's a good idea. I think we have it in archive. So
now I will
that's a great idea.
Do it because when I was running the biopharmaceutical company in California, they had when they had used their very first device, and then it's framed in the office, and it just is great to see. It's a good because I think most of the world has no clue the amount of work that goes just to get it through research and to get into something like Nature is huge, and especially in 2026 right now, or we're in 2025. I'm trying to skip us ahead into 2026, especially in 2025, where so many people are really confused about the benefit and impact of university research and the impact that it can make, and understanding the amount of time, money, resources, serendipity, right, that goes along with that journey. Was huge.
I'm curious to get your opinion about that. Do you think we are doing things right in university?
Oh, that is a great question. Emory University pays my salary. So.
We should be careful.
I will tell you this. I think that if I could see some changes that to happen in university, and one would be to reward scientists. I'm trying to coin this word. I can't get it right. I'm still workshopping it. You know how you have entrepreneurs, technopreneurs? I think there's like a science-preneur, right? So let me know if you come up with a word for that. But to reward them along a 10-year track that is actually focused on getting it past the published paper, right? That's what you get rewarded for right now in most instances. But instead, yes, you can still be rewarded for that. However, add some 10-year track reward for things that actually make it to the patient and drive and pour a lot more resources in to allow that to happen. I think that from my perspective and the people that I work with, that transition and having everyone on board and throwing the right resources and time and energy and the people who really know how to do it into the mix is what I see missing in a lot of places.
I agree. So let's dive into that
because
I think it's our favorite subject. One thing I want to add before we digressing fully about the tumor monorail device. We have an amazing partners at Duke University that's helping us with this, and they actually figure out that translation part really nicely. And I come to some examples there, but the innovative team that took this journey with us, and so very grateful to them. I think regarding what we are doing in university and how things can be done differently, you're right. I think there should be the incentive structures for faculty promotion is one of the things that we should perhaps look at it again.
Yes, I agree.
Do we want to start new tracks of academic title? Let's call it assistant professor of innovation, assistant professor of entrepreneurship, then associate professor of entrepreneurship. And your output or your promotion is going to be reviewed and assessed based on, as you said, the number of startups you started, how many IP you license out from the university, because those also translate to money flowing inside university.
Absolutely.
Right? Like if you can do licensing right, university would benefit from that. And I think that's basically one of the things. I have other ideas and we can discuss, but incentive structure and how right now I think some universities, maybe Emory does that too, I don't know, that they consider, or Georgia Tech, they consider having these kind of milestones as a part of the promotion package, but I don't think they're playing a major role, and we just need to be more deliberate about that. I think there is a new generation of, find a word for it, and I use that word, entrepreneurial academician that trained in MIT's, Stanford's,
Actpreneur.
of something like that. We'll figure. We'll do ChatGPT afterward, and
Exactly.
it's usually good to find those things. That they train in these amazing labs. They publish high impact papers, but they were involved with companies that made a lot of money for the founders. And I think that's a conversation we need to be a little bit more deliberate about. I think there's a cultural component. So
Yes,
the incentive structure,
yes.
there is a cultural component. And I think we should have an honest conversation about potential impact that we can have in society beyond. There is a place for hardcore science, don't get me wrong. And I think academia is for that. But there is also room for doing a little bit of more translation closer to real world impact work. And some of the activities that I do at Emory before joining the endowment had to do with those and developing those kind of efforts.
When I think too, it's that when I work with teams and work with individuals, a perspective I have is that not every scientist who's come up with a great idea should start a company. Some are brilliant scientists.
Absolutely.
And you know what? They should get that technology to a certain space, license it out to somebody else, and then develop the next
Absolutely.
great thing. And a struggle that I see are those types of researchers who then are kind of told that they should start a company. So then they start moving down that path, but it's a disaster.
That's right.
It is an absolute disaster. And trying to get the mindset of, the idea of who's the right CEO for this stage of a company, or who's the right person to lead a project at this stage of a project journey. And I think that then the disconnect is that so many of those types of individuals don't have the training. They're not trained on how to lead.
And personality is not just.
And personality,
it's
exactly.
It's not just training, right? Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No. Please interrupt me as much as you want.
Yeah.
I do it too. So yeah, I think it's that not all scientists should be entrepreneurs because they don't want to, or they don't have the personality, and that's not what I tell my teams are. You need to look at the team you're currently working with. Mm-hmm. I say, open up Excel, list every team member, list what your superpowers are.
Absolutely.
And then take a step back and see what superpowers you're missing. And that's how you determine, doing that analysis, you can determine, are we the right team to take it to market? Or is this something that's going to be licensed to GE, Philips, or, whoever? And if we're the right team, what are we missing to have that superpower team to take it to market? And I think that so many of us in biomedical engineering, for example, we didn't take business classes, we didn't take finance classes, any of that kind of stuff. So bringing in those resources or the individuals who know how to do those well. I will say, the track thing you just mentioned, that we had a university from Korea come and visit, and they're looking to do something very similar to that with MDs. And having a program where the MDs can choose if they're going to do a track that is you're a physician, but you're also an entrepreneur or you're an inventor. And so they're working on a pathway to require less days in clinic for those physicians because instead they want them to be inventing or working on whatever the next great thing is.
No, I think physicians are generally very inventive. More than physicians, actually nurses. It's one of the untapped things at Emory especially. I don't know if you know, we have a #1 at Emory nursing school.
Yes.
And, nurses...
It's the Rollins College of Nursing, right?
Yes, I believe so. So nurses they have to come up with solutions on demand. And there's a lot of engineering mindset in a very surprising way to figure out, So I think physicians, nurses have that kind of inventive mindset. But for running business, it's not just about inventing a new thing, right?
No.
Like managing people, et cetera, et cetera. So I think to your point, yes, there is a component of these multidimensional academician that they like to be in academic environment, but they have that kind of entrepreneurial itch and also capability, maybe raw talent to do things. So I think for them there should be a path. For the rest of us that are not as talented, then we should provide a way to form teams and build a culture and humility to understand that even though you're publishing a Nature science paper, and I know it's a tremendous task, people go through their whole academic life cycle and never publish in one of these high impact journals. So publishing one of them is just huge. And I understand in our mind, faculty mind, I also wear different hats, so I'm putting my academician hat. We think that's the end of it. But if you think about it in context of therapeutics, medical devices, healthcare, I would say that's perhaps 10% of what needed to be. That's the first 100 miles of the 1,000 miles. And you need to have an understanding that the rest, you can be a partner, perhaps, but it requires a different kind of skill set and talent to get it all the way to human. And we are not talking about even profit, revenue, Fortune 500. No, we're talking about
just get the first implant.
Just get it there.
Right.
To have a business, there is a regulatory aspect, there is a reimbursement,
Quality.
there's quality, IP. For medical devices, you need to have a blocking IP portfolio. You can just, it's for drug is simpler because this is a compound and you have a intellectual property on it directly. But for device, you need to think about all the other ways that this can be done potentially and perhaps block them from a business standpoint. And again, that cultural component of a faculty thinking, am I going to block people to like, no, we are in it. So it's different, right? Like you need to make sure that people understand that language. Know for successful translation, you need to think through lens of commercialization, and you can be in your island, but outside world is thinking about things in a different way. And I know some of these might be controversial, and I'm being deliberate about them, but because I think we should start talking about that to have that impact to society ultimately.
Yeah, I can think of one team that I've worked with that a struggle. You know, they have a great technology that's a license play. But a struggle is this individual really also, first off, wants to have every bell and whistle on something. And you and I both know that can be the disaster of what you're trying to create. But additionally, doesn't understand, wants to then collaborate with the individuals who really should be paying for the license for it. And the minute you start collaborating, then you're in joint discovery, then you're in joint IP. Then so going down this road a little bit though, like this is a different mindset, right? This is a bringing money back into the university and to the individual from a mechanism that you're actually selling or licensing versus just being collaborative so that you can potentially get it to the patient sooner. What do you see of the culture difference between those two mindsets?
The mindset of being collaborative within university, you mean?
No, outside.
Outside.
Yeah. Without any guardrails, because I see that risk a lot, and I've asked, did anyone sign an NDA for this? Oh no, we were just having a conversation, writing down a whole bunch of stuff, and the next thing you know, you don't have any IP anymore because it's been shared. So I guess the real question is, what's the value of IP?
Okay, so that's that's interesting. A few things I want to react to. One. I think generally speaking, we are putting the way that we are packaging things can be different. So it's the collaboration piece that you're mentioning is interesting. I think it all goes back to providing education and understanding of what does it take, what is the importance of IP. So let's talk about that for a second. I think Office of Technology Transfer at Emory, perhaps Georgia Tech, Stanford, Duke, places I've been, they all have this kind of stat that 80%, 90%, I might be exaggerating a little bit here, of things actually come to us either very last minute or after the fact that they are published. And people don't understand that if you publish this, and people do it out of good heart. I mean, I had this experience myself when I was in graduate school that people are like, no, we want everybody to know about this. Well, you just killed that technology, not for yourself, for anybody else, because nobody can have any sort of ownership over this knowledge that you develop in form of an asset.
Right.
So this is the math, right? This is Silicon Valley Bank data that I looked at a few years ago before the whole thing. So For a medical device, for a class 3 medical device that goes through a PMA process, it takes anywhere between
Which
70...
for the audience who doesn't know, PMA is pre-market approval process.
That's right. So it requires clinical trial, extensive preclinical work, and you go through phases, not exactly phase 1, 2, 3, but early feasibility study, perhaps pilot, and then pivotal. It takes anywhere between 70 to $100 million to do that kind of translation,
Yep.
right? Who is going to give you that money and for what? The very core of it is intellectual property asset. On day one, you want to get some money from an angel, from a VC. You say, in exchange of this asset that I have, this moat that I build, besides my core team, besides everything else, this is the most tangible thing. If you don't have that, you don't have a core to build anything, especially for healthcare. I know in tech and software is different. IP probably is not as important.
Well, software IP is not as important because really in software, your goal is to just iterate so that you're always one step ahead of your competitor. And then you also, my belief as well in software is you can really get ahead if you have an excellent customer experience engine and that kind of stuff, because software historically is not known for that. So you have those pieces of it that you can then build, and how you have your reoccurring revenue from subscription models. And so it's a different type of asset in the software world than what we're talking about in a device, drug, or a therapeutic space.
That's right. It's all about, and it's a ever evolving landscape, right? Like tomorrow you might have you need to build some sort of moat, especially if you're going for something that takes a long time.
Right.
Your investors, whatever their phenotype is, they want to make sure that their investment is protected. Either you have a very talented team, or you have customer acquisition figured out in tech, or there is some moat somewhere, right? Although it's being very challenged during this, the whole AI craze that we are living in. I don't know what are the moats of some of these bigger companies and how they can be actually disrupted really fast. But in a reasonable, logical way, I'll provide you money. I want to protect it somehow. And for medical devices and therapeutics, generally IP is doing that in a very early stages.
So how would you say to the skeptic out there that may believe that, okay, so we understand like the economic component of it right here, right? Like I am not going to give you money for something that everyone else already has the recipe for, right? If you're making the world's best chocolate chip cookies and everyone has the recipe for it, I'm not going to pay you for that recipe, right? However, then some people may say, well, if everyone had access to it, maybe then somehow it could get to the market faster without anyone having to put money in it, which I know is like bullshit, right? That could never happen. But I think the world just doesn't understand when they hear $100 million or $1 billion for a drug or something like that. And then they see the price of it to pay. There's such of a cognitive disconnect between the amount of work and effort it takes to actually make an impact in something. And looking at the instance where we were just talking about in the cancer state that you're working with, where basically no impact has been made in the past 100 years. So how do you justify to the world's eye the amount of money we pay for these things in that instance?
So a few things. One, and I think people have the point of view about pharma and the cost of drugs and healthcare. We are basically paying for as United States. We are paying for the rest of the world regarding medical device, biotech innovation. I might get some pushback on that, but I think majority of innovation is being done here. So, and American payers are paying for that. That's why the healthcare is such a high cost here. Now, you can argue again, I don't want to let's count how many times I use the word AI during this interview. But
let's do it.
But AI, allegedly, and there are people on both sides of the camp that can drive the cost down significantly, whether it's through figuring out how you're going to have a target identification or a material that's going to work in using modeling. or running a clinical trials in more adaptive way, or predicting which one would have a safer profile. So not do animal study, skip part of the human studies, and that's going to reduce the cost significantly. So that's hopefully going to translate.
Which the FDA just put a new guidance
That's
out
right.
about that.
That's
so,
right.
yes.
That's right. Which is, I think, directionally, it's the right direction. Are we there yet? I don't know. I think the main issue, and I was actually in a meeting a few weeks ago, a venture capital meeting, very much focused on therapeutics. And this was a conversation we had at the reception, really back and forth, heated discussion that are we ready for AI? And actually
Right.
AI is going to do anything. I think the main issue, if you boil it down, is we actually don't know how human body works, right? For the most part, we don't know. If this was a car that was assembled by BMW or Mercedes, and you know every single component of it, yes, then you can feed the data, figure out some sort of modeling, and predict.
The human body is the epitome of human in the loop challenges, like on the other side of it. I remember when I was at Medtronic and I was proctoring cases when we were running the renal denervation studies with Medtronic. They'd purchased RDN. And so I was proctoring cases all over the US and in some parts of Europe. And one of the things that I loved about working with biomedical engineers versus electrical engineers, I had look at me, Eric, you should see, I'm hitting the microphone. One of the things that when I had this one engineer who was learning, and he was an electrical engineer, and his brain worked very much like you were just talking about the mechanics of the car, right? Because the circuits are all wired this way, and you understand and he couldn't understand that the human body portion of it is the big thing that throws everything off. And you have to constantly be considering that in every stage of the game.
That's right. So this is what I learned from one of my mentors that both of us know and admire, Ravi Balamkanda.
Yes.
He, I don't know if you remember, he used to teach physiology course.
Yeah, I took it at Georgia Tech.
And it was amazing.
Yes.
It was. I never took that course, but I just went and listened to the one that I could find time during graduate school. And the way that he was simplifying things was just amazing. As you both of know, very intelligent and visionary scientist and leader. One thing he was always telling us that biomedical engineer is the only engineering field that doesn't know what it's dealing with. We don't have you think about buildings, civil engineers, they know how this is built, right? Mechanical engineering, electrical, biomedical engineers
right,
have no idea what they're dealing with. So there's a little bit of, so coming back to the role of AI, until we figure this out, and AI can help us figure this out also, but all of these components you think about, but here's, if I want to summarize, from a point that you find or you identify disease and you're trying to figure out a therapy for it, all the way to translation. Let's say there are 50 bottlenecks from preclinical to clinical to commercialization. I think AI can help with maybe 20 of those today. And that would reduce the bottleneck is equal to cost, reducing bottleneck, reducing the cost. So the cost of healthcare hopefully is going to be reduced, and the cost of drugs is going to be reduced. I don't know how we got here, so I'm trying to figure out and connect the dots. But basically, we were talking about
it was
the
about
cost.
just about the cost, and when you think about the cost, and about when people have this idea that we shouldn't be investing in basic research, or we shouldn't be investing in some of these things because the amount it's actually going to cost to actually make it somewhere isn't beneficial to the United States, or isn't beneficial to our overall economy or something like that. And I think that when we look at, for example, one of my favorite stories is have you ever heard of the Golden Goose Award?
No.
So the Golden Goose Award, and Katie, if we can put this in the show notes, but it's given to when a basic research is like translated into something that has a huge impact on humanity. So the cool one that I know of, because I'm a beekeeper, is that Thomas Seeley, who's like the father basically of beekeeping, and some engineers at Georgia Tech and some other universities, they used his research on the foraging behaviors of honeybees to then implement into the infrastructure of computers and how they modulate where signals are going out in like a infrastructure ecosystem. I'm not saying it exactly right, but I think that we oftentimes, when you go back to the conversation we had about culture and about different people, you also have those individuals who are really brilliant. They come up with these great ideas and it's published in an impact paper. And then you have somebody else who sees that and is suddenly like, wait, this can be applied in a completely different way. They can have a significant impact on society. And I think that there are so many instances of where that's happened to remind us how important that basic research is, that it can lead into those other areas.
That's right. That's right. I think somebody needs to connect the dots.
Yeah.
And I think they are understanding how we are. So we are going a little bit scattered, but I think there's a common theme here. We receive a lot of funding from all of these. I know it's under attack right now, governmental support, et cetera, but generally we've been receiving all these universities. I think people can figure out the numbers, but they're huge.
Right.
In research funding we receive. There is a legitimate question to be asked, and I'm talking about this from absolute empathy and coming from the fact that I'm part of this, all of these organizations as well, and I'm playing a role. But there is a question there by society that what's the impact of what you guys are working on?
Right.
And there is a cultural component. Also, there is a knowledge component also for society. The whole notion of the treatment for cancer is already out there, but it's hidden on a shelf somewhere. I mean, maybe in some cases there is a strategic commercialization, marketing, blah blah. Sure, okay, but in majority of cases, I think the reason that people think there is such a thing is because they read a news that talks about, oh, diabetes is cured in mice.
right.
But people don't pay attention to that part, right? Like, you always have this, BBC article, CNN article. They covered our technology. BBC wrote a very nice article called it Tumor Monorail, and this is when the Nature Materials paper came out. And, people probably anticipating that GBM is a thing of a past.
Right.
I don't know how many years later, we are still trying to figure out clinical trial. And it's not like that we were not working on it.
Right.
It takes a long time to go. So my point is there is that component of providing that education to society and being accurate about what is being discovered, how much does it take. And yes, there are other components, other stakeholders that are playing a role in how costly and timely this is. Regulatory agencies, for example, right? Yes. But it is what it is, right? So you just need to provide education. This is a path, and we're working hard to get to the other side as soon as possible.
Okay, so I was speaking this last week at Biotech X conference, and Preetha Ram, who's on Biolocity's oversight committee board, was also speaking, and she was they were talking about AI and about venture funding of AI and seeing mega rounds out there right now.
Crazy.
Insane, right?
Yeah.
So what part of you, because I hear that too, and I'm thinking, you remember that whole .com era?
Yeah.
Like so in your opinion, when you're thinking about and you're evaluating AI, even in the use for your teams or for the fund or anything that you're doing, what guardrails do you put around the use of AI to try and utilize it to its max ability, but also not fall into some of the challenges that you could have with it?
Well, that's a million, billion, $1 trillion question. Seriously, these days, right? Like, because you can see how Anthropic differentiated itself from OpenAI by actually initially focusing as at least from a branding standpoint on the guardrail, safety, etc. I don't feel I'm eligible to say anything very much informed I know things that everybody know, but I think you need to be really technical to understand that component of it. But the way that I thought you were going to with that question.
Alrighty, jump into it. What did you think?
So I think you were talking about valuations, and so
Yes.
I have
Oh, yeah.
I have the venture title of Me Too, right?
Yep.
So at the endowment, I'm responsible for, and we have a team, and I'm playing a role there to find all of these venture capital firms and evaluate them and see how they're thinking about things. And you mentioned .com, and there's everyday conversation about are we in a bubble, etc. The interesting thing about .com and comparison we can do, it wasn't the fact that internet was not a thing. It was actually became a thing, right? But there was a lot of sacrifices and a lot of victims on the way. So we are not questioning the impact of AI. Who is going to be the winner? Who is going to survive is the question. And as an investor, you need to figure out, have some sort of crystal ball, or at least develop some mental models or pattern recognition to figure out who is going to potentially survive. But I think essentially the question is not around the fact that AI is a bubble. It's around the fact that we don't know who is going to survive, and that's a nature of a bubble, because we don't know. We are just feeding everything and it's just becoming this monstrous thing right now, which I think going to be corrected.
Yeah, I think naturally it
Yeah.
will course correct at some stage. And
Yes.
it'll just be interesting. I mean, I'm excited just to watch the journey. I was too young. We were both really too young to watch the .com
Yes.
really journey.
That's right.
You're 10 years younger than me, so I know you're. I was too young, and so I think that it's fascinating. One of the things that I like to think about in these instances is also taking a step back and going to the core of superpowers in certain areas, optimizing those, finding the risks, trying to at least prepare as much as you can for the risks. And then you have to have a certain level of acceptance that there are things you just can't prepare for and you just have to go for it.
That's right.
Okay, what should we dig into next?
Um,
Because I know you have some things you want to talk about.
I think we are hitting the right subjects. What needs to be done in the ecosystem, university ecosystem. I think about the future of higher ed, and I'm curious to get your opinion about these, and maybe that would be a good thing to talk about. What's going to be the future of universities in the U.S., especially, maybe that's not the right way of thinking about things, but you have first tier and second tier. Let's not go multiple tiers. I know it's much more than that, but there are universities that have brand, and then there is that club association, and then you're a Dookie, I'm a Dookie, so, and it helps with your career, everything, which is great, right? So I think that value is still there. But in the words of chat GPTs and Khan Academies, I know it's for earlier stages, or even YouTube and TikTok, what's the future of higher ed? And if there is a reason for universities to start evolving, and if they have to evolve, what's the direction they should go to?
Yeah,
I have thoughts about that, but I'd love to hear. What do you think?
It's a great question. Well, one thing that I think about, we had this conversation at the College of Engineering board meeting earlier this year. We did a trip up in Boston, and we were talking
Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech. And we were talking about, since AI now has the ability to fulfill the roles of entry-level positions at places, then how do people just jump from graduating from college to above an entry-level position? Like, how does that restructure suddenly happen? And I believe that a shift is having more programs and universities focus more on problem-solving skills, like problem-solving learning labs and things like that, where we're actually, if you're in that environment and you're learning and growing, it's not as much that you're learning the material, like, I don't use my Calc 4 at all, right? Maybe there was a benefit to me learning it. I don't know. But I do use all my problem solving things. So I think that a shift towards problem solving and increase in ethics and some of those pieces are very valuable. Once again, though, I will say I'm not a believer that everyone should go to college.
Okay.
I strongly believe there are lots of people that can have a huge impact on the world in different trade schools.
This is more recent, or you had this for a while?
This is a great question. I think I've had this for probably about 10 years. I probably thought this is the case. And at the same point, Georgia Tech completely changed my life. Absolutely. I would do it all over again a gazillion times over. And so, but here's another example. I did not get a master's or an MBA. Instead, in several of my career decisions that I made, like a couple times when I left Medtronic and I went to run research at Emory Healthcare and the cardiovascular, I just decided that I was taking a pay cut. And instead, it was kind of like paying for a master's because I was learning so much in so many diverse areas that really pushed me forward much quicker in the role when we were building Florence Healthcare. And so I think that education in and of itself, universities in and of themselves are not the end all be all. And that it's really being very thoughtful and strategic about your career and different ways that you can continue to learn. I think universities should be set up to have the ability for individuals to be lifelong learners in the areas that they need to be able to solve problems.
But why do they need universities for that?
Some type of mechanism. And you're right. Maybe it doesn't need to be a university, but maybe the university is YouTube University or TikTok University.
How often you use ChatGPT? I think
every single day.
And do you talk to ChatGPT or you type mainly?
I type.
Have you tried talking like the movie Her?
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't seen the movie Her though. I need to see it. I did name my Scout. Mine is named Scout, and I tell him go and look for these things and suggest these things and da da da. So, but I type it.
Okay, interesting. And I'm surprised when I hear that majority of people, that's a response that I get. I'm like, no, we don't talk. It's
so
amazing.
Do you talk to yours?
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Have you named yours?
I was doing. No, it doesn't have a name, but. I maybe that's my guardrail. If I start giving a name and then we are in that hair territory.
That's what someone said to me the other day, and I said, "Well, I'm not going to start having a relationship with Scout, my ChatGPT." But yeah.
So, by the way, because you asked this, and maybe that's good. In parentheses, just quickly share. I think large language models are our introduction to AI. The real use of AI, well, 5 years from now, maybe less than that, we'll come back and it's like, oh my God, we were just so obsessed with ChatGPT and everything. And I think at some point people start adopting. Unfortunately, I think things can also happen in a very negative way. I mean, we heard about the suicide a few weeks ago.
I haven't heard about that. What?
Yeah, I mean, your ChatGPT has this tendency of being agreeable, right? Like if you have
it always tells me what I want to hear.
If you feel that you are going to direction A, it will reinforce it.
Yes,
and you can see, especially if you have a very long conversations, the internal guardrails, according to things that I'm saying, right now exist. Will at OpenAI, for example, infrastructure, it significantly reduced when you have a long conversation, so you can be persuaded in directions that you shouldn't be persuaded. So I think we eventually, like what I'm saying about not naming her, is just my own guardrail, right? So, and I think we start developing those guardrails internally if it's not even forced. So, and we see effect of AI somewhere else in physical world, and we can talk about that. But talking to So I'll tell you exactly why I started. I actually had this conversation before coming here. And when I'm driving, it's like you're generating your own podcast. And any topic you want, right? Like especially things that there is a reliable information on internet for those. Because it goes to all of these resources to get. So, and Reddit, I've heard, is like number one, right? Okay. But it will figure out and give you, especially if you're thinking about historical thing, right? Like, we always think about, when I was a kid, a few days ago, I heard that, I remember that we were saying that oil is from dinosaurs, right? Like
Oil?
oil,
Okay.
like I don't know. I heard this when I was a
When
kid.
you were a kid?
I never double checked, and it was always in my. And then it occurred to me, I was like, is it like just really dinosaurs that are becoming oil? No, it's not actually dinosaurs. It's during the same time, and it's like blah blah. Anyway,
Right.
so I had this whole rabbit hole conversation going to different periods of geology with ChatGPT. But yesterday I was thinking, maybe we can talk about at some point if it comes up, talk about how Silicon Valley became Silicon Valley, and how does Atlanta, Georgia wants to become another Silicon Valley, or it has its own unique identity. That's a topic that we talked about before also, right? So, and I've been always thinking about the fact that how Silicon Valley was formed. Was it because of Stanford? Was it because of the social justice movements during that time? Was it because of the artistic and expressive nature of it? Was it the one person that moved there that started, a semiconductor business? Was it a company? Do you know how Silicon Valley was
and
formed?
I have the book literally on my bookshelf, and I haven't read it yet. But I
What's the
think
name of the
it's
book?
Silk Road Ventures, or the road where all the VCs are on is Silk Road, right? Or
Sand
something.
Hill Road.
Sand Hill Road,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and it supposedly talks about how it was formed. I haven't read it yet. I don't know the answer.
So the venture component is actually the last component of the story. And this is my artificial podcast with my chat GPT. And
Yeah.
we went deep, and it was really interesting. So there was a gentleman, I think it's relevant, so I talk about this.
Yes,
but
go for it. I
it's
wanna
an
hear it.
example of, utilizing AI that way, or large language models. So gentleman named Frederick Terman. He is considered grandfather of Silicon Valley. He was a Stanford professor, very relevant to this conversation actually. Stanford professor, Hewlett and Packard were his students, and he was just very much like electrical engineer. Became a dean of College of Engineering at Stanford. We're talking 40s and 50s, just to give you a time frame. He was encouraging a lot of entrepreneurship activity at Stanford. Just this guy. And I don't know if he had other people, but he was just driving it.
So he was way ahead of his time.
He was encouraging, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he basically developed a thing from nothing. It was probably in his mind. And there were other elements. There's another player in this whole story, William Shockley, which is co-inventor of transistors, got a Nobel physics in 40s, 50s also, in Bell Lab, moved to Bay Area. His decision of moving to Bay Area from Bell Lab is actually made what's Silicon Valley based on transistors. But he was allegedly terrible manager and leader. So people left his organization and they formed this thing called Child Hill, which was a grandfather company of all the Silicon Valley companies later on. So Intel came out of that, AMD came out of that. One of them called Moore, the Moore law you hear, was actually one of those people. And the also culture of being rebellion and a spin out, the concept of a spinning out and forming your own startup. It's fascinating, right? Like
I'm super fascinated by this.
It's this Stanford guy, the semiconductor guy. One of them was great. One of them actually, but because of his bad people skill, resulted in a bunch of other positive thing, long-term form. And then you have that, and then you have formation of these entities, and then later venture actually formed. So yes, Stanford play. I always thought did Stanford really play a major role in formation of Silicon Valley, and it did. And this guy, just individual, made a huge impact. But this was all conversation I had with my ChatGPT over voice.
And now, I'm gonna try it now, and people, when you see me walking down the street talking to myself, I'm really talking to Scout. Okay, so you asked me the question though about universities. You have thoughts about it as well. What do you think the value, or how do you think university, the makeup of it should change over the next 20 years?
So this is interested, very fascinated by your response because it's very different from what I'm thinking. And I always wanted to hear how other people, leaders like yourself, think about these things. By the way, really appreciate everything you're doing for Atlanta, Georgia Tech, Emory ecosystem. I know this is labor of love.
It is.
This is labor of love. All the other leadership position that I have in university truly mean it. I mean, you don't need the salary, you don't need the title. You can do, much grander stuff, but I know you care, and I appreciate. Really wanted to acknowledge that. My point of view is really maybe now repetitive right now. I think we should go to our translation. We should close the gap as much as we can between real world impact and what's being built in universities. We need to have that kind of translation mindset, especially for engineering stuff. Like, I understand if you're doing physics or chemistry or biology or hardcore science, yes. I mean, there is a gap, which is fine. We need.
So
those.
how do you think, and how does that differ from what my response was, I think we need it to be able to continue to teach people how to solve real world problems. And your response is that you want to see the translation. So how do you see those two similar and different?
I think they're similar on a high level, that it's both are covering impact. So it's
Yes.
The way that I'm approaching impact is different from how you're approaching impact.
Yep.
I think you're approaching impact from, again, education standpoint. I think university role can be expanded beyond education. And I have a very cool example actually for that.
Yeah.
Cool way of looking at things. Not this example already. One very interesting characteristic of American universities, a sports team. It does not exist anywhere else.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, you're right.
It's amazing. It gives you that psychological connection, emotional connection. I remember when you have mascots, you have colors. You go to the very first thing, I think day
You
one.
have fans and they get in fights with each other because of their school.
And then you end up donating because of all of those emotional. So branding, whoever came up with this idea of let's join a sports with education. And they're actually, personality-wise, these are not your typical like nerds versus athletes.
Right.
Somehow they figured out, maybe another chat GPT I need to
know,
do.
that's what I'm thinking.
Who came up with this? Usually, and the beauty of these things is when you just drill down, it ends up being one person. And I think it's a beauty of how you feel you can change the world. Like if you go back to the leader theme, knowing that at some point, like the idea of America, somebody was sitting somewhere in England over coffee chatting with his friends. And if you drill down, if you had a capability, you can really go, it was September 5th, 1600, blah, blah, that this idea was generated. And yes, it's not a binary, it takes time, but you know what I'm saying, right?
And lots of people think people are crazy during those phases.
Yes.
And then it actually happens. And I mean, it's much to the fact of also how many things happen via serendipity and how many things are planned and thought out. Meaning, the example I'm thinking of is Boston, for example.
Yeah.
So when Boston needed to make a shift in what the city was actually producing, they were very deliberate. They put Massachusetts put billions of dollars in the 80s into Boston to attract all of the pharma and all of those companies, and that's how they built that ecosystem there, which is a very strategic mechanism that happened versus some of these others. The cascade effect of it is really amazing to dial into and see.
A lot of things need to go right? But there is an initiation point, and then you have, yes, we are initiating a bunch of things every day, and then don't go anywhere because all of those other infrastructure components are not there. Silicon Valley story also, there was a huge governmental grant support component at some point, I don't know, 50s, 60s or something like that. So not arguing against that for sure. But I like how dynamic this conversation was, like going to the branches and then we need to come back to the main, like, okay, where are we? No, but going back to where I see the future of universities. And I
Yes.
think fundamentally, we want to be a little bit more deliberate about translation. And it's not just about the
Yes.
education component. It has to do with, as we talked about, and that's what I thought is repetitive, incentivization, structure, promotion, capital being
Capital.
deployed,
Yep.
making the walls of university a little bit more porous for people from outside to come in, recognize their presence, however, by access, email address, a card. Stanford is brilliant in doing that, by the way. And that's one of the things that I learned there. We will go to these receptions, and 80% of people at that reception are not actually academicians, but you learn a ton from them.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I see universities should, again, not overnight 90% of effort being like that, but gradually, maybe 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%, maybe we cap it at like whatever, 20% of effort, totality of budget being spent on these things. Right now, it's sub 1%. And I think there's definitely room. So it's hard to understand where universities are going to go. But if you think about all of these people graduating from these universities that are leaders of these tech companies, they are wealthy. They are going to figure out, in my opinion, although there is a lot of negative view, even in Silicon Valley, about function of universities more recently. But I think the club component, the brand, all of the emotional component of it. And so this is what I said about the sport. Somebody did this with something completely irrelevant to education and figure out a way to make this win-win for everybody. It actually helps with professional sports. It actually also helps with university.
And it helps to fund the students who are going to,
brilliant. I love.
And also the other brilliant piece is the use of the TV broadcasting numbers that then go back to the university based on if you're in the ACC or the SEC or whatnot. So conversations were coming up about Tech's viewership in the past couple of games and the amount of money that then will go back in a decision made for the Tech Georgia game to be played in Mercedes-Benz this year because the viewership there versus, because it's a home game, right? Versus being at Bobby Dodd or now Hyundai Field, right? The math and economic component of that then can feed back into the university to be able to do what? I don't know, but yes.
Yeah, so I'm saying I'm using that as a precedent for
change.
University doesn't need to be all about education, but it can, the diversifying revenue is a different conversation we can have, but diversifying also the role that university is playing. So you can argue that universities are helping with athleticism and sportsmanship and a sport in the U.S. generally through colleges, right? So I can think about, I'm really improvising here. So this is a thought occurring to me. Maybe there is an analogy there for focusing on commercialization and translation as a way to align all the stakeholders of society, get university closer, show that the taxpayer money was used in a way that resulted in a meaningful direct impact.
Yes. Yeah.
Help with that whole socioeconomical perception about university, which would help politically too.
A setback we have for that? A blocker is that right now in most universities, your pay, that when you get hired, your pay is based on how advanced your degree is. And so the struggle, like for example, we're hiring a new managing director for this program that Office of Commercialization at Georgia Tech is doing. And the caliber of the individual that we really want to bring in to do this role, the only way we're going to get that caliber of an individual who likely does not have they have an advanced degree in life. They have an advanced degree in building companies to build, this kind of stuff, right? In order they're going to have to be someone like us that takes a huge pay cut to be able to do that because you are financially compensated at universities based on how high your level of education is. Haven't figured out, at least I know the universities that I work with haven't figured out the mechanism to translate these number of successes into the same level of experience. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so once again, we're rewarding individuals for getting higher level of education, not rewarding them for actually going and building things and then teaching others how to build things.
Where is that coming from, you think?
I don't know. I wonder how
Because
much of it
it's
is a culture, like historical. It's always been
There's
done
a little
that
bit of
way.
arrogance component there,
I think so too.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I had an instance where I was looking to hire someone and the previous person had a certain salary. Okay. And I wanted to hire her at the same salary. Now, her experience is like she's built a company, she's sold it, she's like all exactly what I need in the commercialization. The other individual had a PhD. They would not pay her. They ended up paying her like $12,000 less because she doesn't have a master's or a PhD, and I'm like, this individual is way more qualified to do what we need to do in our role than the other individual was amazing. So it's not that, but it's that the sight on it is completely skewed.
For culture to change, what needs to be changing, you think? Is it education? Is it leadership? Sorry, I don't want to bias your mind, but...
Yeah, I think it's the way that we evaluate and understand metrics towards success and what's been done. And taking a step back. And once again, taking a step back and doing an Excel document and listing the superpowers of certain instances and making decisions based on that, not on an advanced degree or on, some of these types of things. Like I want to see not just, for example, that someone has been at a company for 8 years. I want to see that they've been at the company 8 years, they've been promoted, or they can show huge things that they've made. And I think in the academic setting, we often reward tenure or time within it and not the other component of it. And I think we're missing that humanistic piece of it. And that's also, I think, why we also struggle with the individuals who love staying in academia, have that mindset, and they fit into it really well. And that's not the mindset that's going to commercialize stuff.
One of my mentors at Stanford had this list of, 20, 30, 40 diseases in his back pocket. And not very accurate with numbers, but we get the idea there. And he would say, I would look at this list, and if something has not been disrupted for 20, 30 years, this is a prime time. You want to go after it. And I think universities has been doing the same thing for a long time. Yeah. So some of these are very much of a legacy. And I know we have folks in universities that think in a certain way about impact and what's being done. I think that's a conversation that we need to have deliberately and openly. Maybe things like this will help facilitate those conversations. But is there a way for university role somewhere? Is university role evolving? Is it all now just about education? Now we have all these other components that you can tailor, have your own, voice ChatGPT moment, learn about something that it's very tailored to what you want to know. Is there still benefit? Going back to, by the way, what you said about, if that course really helped, I think there, in undergraduate level, there is I'm playing devil advocate. I think there is a narrative, there is a point to be made that you want to learn about things that you have no idea and no interest, because you want to expand your mental models and pattern recognition, because that's the name of the game. At the end of the day, if you want to proceed in your life, you want to have a massive library of patterns and then access them at a proper time and mix them in a way that results in something beautiful, creative.
Well, this is what my daughter and I are doing right
Yeah.
now. We're competing on Duolingo with chess. Do
Yeah.
you know that you can now do chess
I
lessons
had
on
no idea.
Duolingo?
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah. And my daughter introduced me to it. So now, but it is like pattern recognition, for example,
That's right.
in chess, and thinking strategically in those sorts of
That's right.
ways.
That's right. And you know, they're all. I'm reading this book that I highly recommend. It's called "Investment: The Last Liberal Art," which is really comforting, because if you think about investment work, if it's more of an art, then AI would get to it at a later stage. So you have
Right.
a little bit of more time. And the idea is, if you want to be a good investor, you need to understand the core idea of these different, seemingly irrelevant subjects.
Yes.
At least the core ideas. Like physics, you want to know equilibrium.
Right.
And then there is equilibrium has a function in economy and the stock market, et cetera, et cetera. So you can expand it there. In biology, you want to understand evolution, because again, complex system, like economical system, go through evolution, and they are always amorphous and they're evolving. In fact, one of the quotes that I'm using a lot these days: strong opinions, loosely held. That's very much
loosely held. Yes.
So
yes.
you want to, at any point you're talking about things, you want to have conviction. But if there's new data and your idea
Exactly.
changes, you don't want to be dogmatic, and you want to be like, yeah, that's what I thought yesterday. Now I have more data. Obviously, you don't want to flip flop.
Yeah, you don't want to be wishy-washy.
That's
There's
right.
a difference between being confident and utilizing the data to make a decision and being confident about it, and just going with whatever the new fun thing is
That's
to
right.
do, right? So,
That's right.
but that also goes to I think it goes to those critical problem-solving skills that we're talking about.
That's right.
And you do, as you're saying, you do have to have a basis of knowledge in different areas to even be able to apply those
That's
basic
right.
skills
That's
too.
right. So I think that part is your AI tutor going to force you to do all of these things. But maybe part of it is education for people to understand that all of these things that you're learning, you don't need to have a direct utility for it tomorrow or even ever. But there is a part of your brain that it's now expanded because you're
Right.
thinking about things in that way, that one day when you're solving a very challenging problem, that part will help be a piece of a puzzle of a bigger picture and help you solve that problem. So I think that's there. And is AI, but is AI going to disrupt that part? Maybe. But regardless, I think
some people think so, because I just heard this analogy at this conference I was just at, and it was the analogy of GPS. And it was, someone saying, back in the day, I could figure out how to get somewhere, and if I got like stuck somewhere, I could still get back home, or I could wait. And his point was, now I have GPS. If my phone battery is dead or something like that, I am stuck where I'm at. I've lost that amount of, paying attention as you're turning in intersections and doing all of these things. And so some people have used that analogy to say that that's what they fear, that by losing that gap that AI is filling, or, large language models are filling right now, that we're going to get to that point where we've lost that ability to pay attention to the things that matter and the journey and those pieces that can have a significant impact, especially if you need to make a pivot. Maybe some of those things are skipping over opportunities where you should have had a killer experiment or a pivot, but it made assumptions, so you went straight past that, and you're further down the wrong road than what you would have been potentially if you're going along the journey.
Very much possible. I agree. Very much possible. And we don't know. So
it's fun to speculate about.
Yeah.
We're going to watch this episode in 10 years from now and
either
like, say,
we
were stupid.
Or it was like, wow, visionary. It's like, how did they do that? Like that. Somewhere in between, I think we will land. But no, it's interesting too. But going back to a speculation here, and the accuracy of that speculation, again, has to do with how expansive your library is. And that's another thing I want to say about this country. I'm an immigrant myself. Very lucky to be part of this journey in this country, and it's in infancy. And the fact that you feel that you can actually help forming the future of this country, and I've been enabled, at least I feel I am enabled to do that, is an amazing feeling. But that's a function of immigrants also coming to this country, right?
Yes,
Like you're
yes, I
bringing
agree.
a different set of libraries that, folks are not dealing with here. And, in a critical, you see different ethnicity are really great at certain things also here.
Yep.
Coming from, okay, I know how to, like, I have a Middle Eastern background. I think we are very good in deal making, figuring out what are the motives of different stakeholders.
Right.
Get to the bottom of it, align the incentives of the stakeholders, because that's like all the conflicts in the Middle East. So that's a trait, right? So I think
That's a multi-generational trait. Okay, I'm going to make an analogy that, and I don't mean it to be offensive at all, but I'm having had several German Shepherd working dogs. The dogs that come from lines that have been successful working dogs over generation, that basically at 8 weeks, those traits that have then been passed on by whatever happened to the cells of the previous dog and all of those types of things, those stand out at 8 weeks old, and you can select the next best of the best because of that, which is why those programs, and it's what happens in our world, like when you also hear about generational trauma. So there was a period of time when, especially when we had the riots in Atlanta, and here is a strong opinion, loosely held example, okay? Is when the riots happened, I lived over by Centennial Olympic Park. I was right in the middle. Everything turned right before my street. We saw the tear gas, all this kind of stuff. And I was really upset because I thought, I grew up at a high school in Griffin, Georgia, which was 60-40 black-white. And I said, I didn't do anything to these people. They were like my friends. Why are they angry about yada, yada, yada? Okay. And then after the kidnapping, when I went into residential treatment and I started learning about generational trauma, that they've done so many studies. They did a lot of studies of the mothers who were pregnant during 9/11 that were involved in there and the impact it had on their children. They've done studies on generations off of the war camps and things like that. And the idea that basically, I was an egg in my grandmother's womb. So the impact on her as a human being was translated multi-generational through that. And I think we see that in the way that we react to people, react to society, but we also see that in some of those traits that you're talking about.
That's true.
This is where the biomedical and the human in the loop understanding these things matters, because you don't see that in a car that just happened to be built on the same line as some other car at some point.
Yeah. No, first of all, very interesting and totally possible also to think about it that way. But we don't even know how our brain functions for the most part.
Right.
There are ideas. I'm more surprised when things work. Like if there is a drug that's working, I'm like, how on earth? It's like you go to a oil refinery factory, and you have all of these knobs and faucets and pipes, and 100x that, even more, and that's human.
Right. And
the fact that you found this knob that will result in that downstream effect, it's crazy.
Yeah.
When things work, right?
It is.
So I'm more surprised when things work. But to your point, like we don't know how, but these kind of effects, generational effect is a new interesting component for me. I'm educating myself on. So I don't have a rigor scientific opinion about it right now, but definitely. I mean, but how you were raised. Again, I'm using my immigrant background as an example. Is bringing a lot of new patterns, and we have all these sort of patterns coming from all corners of the universe or world coming to United States, and that's one of the strong points.
I recently heard a VC that we're connecting with through Georgia Tech, and they give preference to companies that one or more founders are immigrants, because they have seen the level of discipline, diligent, not giving up, grit, all of that.
Chip on the shoulder.
And chip on the shoulder too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of those pieces in order to be successful as a first generation immigrant are the things they want to see in an entrepreneur that's going to be successful in a first generation type of medical device or drug or something like that.
If you think about immigrants are like, they're entrepreneurs. The immigration journey of especially the first generation, right? People who decide to leave their country and come to another country, whether US or anywhere else, they need to figure out the society. They need to figure out the language. Who are the different stakeholders here? What are their incentives? How can I satisfy all of them? How can I build a team? How can I build a reputation? How can I build legitimacy, credibility? All of the things that an entrepreneur also needs to do to be successful. How do I raise capital, find a job? Build a team, build a community and have a sense of belonging. Very similar. So I think that's another thing here. I think, again, hot take. I think everybody should experience entrepreneurship in the US at least once. Mm-hmm. And, it's not for everybody, but this is the beauty of this country. It's built for entrepreneurs. And if you don't take advantage, it's like you're by the ocean side and you never go walk on the beach. Like, maybe you hate it, sure, but it's by the ocean. Do it once, right?
Yeah.
And the structure is in a way that would encourage you to do that, both culturally, financially, from governmental standpoint.
So thinking about on the leadership side of that, when you're looking at setting up teams, even for the company that you have, or looking at the teams that maybe Emory Biofoundry Fund might fund, what are the key characteristics you're looking for in teams and in the high-level leaders of the teams? We do a lot on this podcast of talking about what's the difference. What do you believe the difference between a manager and a leader is? And so feeding into that from your perspective, what are your thoughts on that?
So maybe I talk about leader versus manager because I think about that sometimes. Few different distinguished characteristics. And by the way, I think the best case scenario is that you are a good manager and also a good leader, but there are different things. Leader, if I want to summarize in few words, leader thinks about future, manager thinks about present. Mm-hmm. Leader thinks about how to disrupt for the most part and has a vision behind it. Manager thinks about how to maintain continuity and work with the constraint that we have. Leader thinks about inspiring. Manager thinks more about controlling, right? Leader is about people. Managing is about process and task and products, right? So I think those are the main differences between leaders and manager. And again, good organization should have leaders that are good managers or good managers are great leaders. But sometimes you can't have both. And for a company, you don't need both. I think you don't want to have too many leaders. Probably you want one leader because usually leaders are thinking about how they're going to do things that's going to even outlast them, right?
Yes.
For a long time. And these can be very divergent. So I don't think you want to have many leaders. But managers you need. And I really like what you said about first figure out what is missing and then understand what is needed. So there are two things you need to know. You need to know yourself, which is actually not easy.
Which is one of the hardest parts.
Yes. People think, you don't know yourself. We have all of these kind of illusions about ourselves and our capability and strength. It's usually not very honest. At least I'm trying to figure out who I am. And you only figure out when you're being tested. So you need to be in environment and conflicts can happen. And then
growth never happens when you're on an easy road.
That's right. So you want to know who you are. And then you want to know what does it take to get from point A to point B. And okay, now what's missing? And bring those people in. And
empower them to actually do the things that you brought them in to do.
Yeah, I think you need to build trust first. And then when you build trust, then obviously if you don't empower them, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You're just wasting everybody's time.
Yeah.
Integrity is also very important. I also always think I have a few mentors. Another since childhood mentor, one day called me and was like, "Do you know what integrity means?" I was like, I think I know. I was like, "Tell me." And then I'll give him a dictionary definition of integrity. And they say, integrity is when you have your mind and your words and your action fully aligned. And I always think about that. I think if you have that and if you have team members, then yes, you can discuss things in a very high level. Like you can have disagreements about your ideology, how you see word, and if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. But if you work with people that have integrity, what they say is what they mean,
Right.
and it's what they do, then I think that's 80% of the road is paved now. The rest of 20% will figure it out.
How do you, I have strong feelings about this, so I'll be curious to see your thoughts on it. How do you factor in the value of diversity and, I'm not going to say equity, but diversity and inclusion into the success of teams or setting teams up for success?
Hot topic, huh?
If anyone can handle a hot topic, it's you.
few days after we got an email. How can I not believe in diversity when I'm an immigrant myself again, right? Like, if this country didn't believe in that, I wouldn't be sitting here and I wouldn't be able to do anything of things that I've done.
You wouldn't have a 40 under 40 from Georgia Tech award
Absolutely.
on your lapel.
I couldn't even attend Georgia Tech commencement ceremony. Funny story. I don't know if I told this to you. I gave the Georgia Tech reflection commencement speech when I graduated, which was a surreal experience.
I bet.
In front of, 7, 8, 9, 10, that basketball stadium.
Yes.
And 6-7 years before that night, I was in my college dorm in Tehran, and I was watching a commencement ceremony of my friend. Or no, actually, my friend got accepted to Georgia Tech, and we YouTube Georgia Tech. The first thing that came up was commencement ceremony. And commencement ceremonies are not something fun to watch, right? We were mesmerized.
Really?
My friend and I were sitting in our dorm, and the whole coordination and organization and glamour and it's nice. I mean, people sitting and then they're talking and soft and like things that you take for granted. It's like I felt like I'm watching Oscar or something. Like,
wow.
And people come and they acknowledge and they get their degree and they're happy. It was like we were looking at each other and we were thinking like we had one pair of headphones. I had the left one. He had the right one. I remember
those days.
And we were watching this like maybe for an hour, right? Like just boring commencement. Wayne Clough was the president back then, and I love this guy. So he came, gave a speech. I think he actually put Georgia Tech on the map for the most part. That's my opinion, but I'll like to be, more, so correct me if I'm wrong. But he came and gave this amazing speech. We watched it, and I was thinking, can I be an attendee in that ceremony one day? Like just sit maybe up there somewhere and watch it close by. 7 years later, I'm sitting at a podium, not only got my PhD degree, but also, giving a commencement speech. And guess what? That night, our actual guest speaker, was Wayne Clough.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So I went to him and I told him this story. This is what, by the way, what I told you was what I gave in my commencement speech. I talked about that journey.
Yeah.
But no, really, I'm grateful for everything I received here. And it came because of the belief in diversity and inclusion. Now, how you're implementing that,
exactly.
I think it's a fair topic of conversation. I wouldn't be shy of that conversation. I think yes, there's, and the other thing is in this country, if you think about things, everything is like a pendulum going to the right and left, which is fine. Like a stock market, the same. It goes, up and down, up and like you look at days and weeks, there's volatility. But if you zoom back,
Right.
it's always going up. And that's what we should care about at the end of the day. I think we get very much in the heated conversation of a day, but in the long term, things will go and find a right way. And you want to actually go back and forth. You want to go to this direction and test it and say, it's like market testing. What's a ceiling? What's a, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's okay. So this is getting too extreme. So let's adjust it. And then you go to, anyway. So I think it's a very healthy conversation, but in principle, I think it's great.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think that any conversation that I love conflict, so I love having conversations that maybe allow us to think differently about things as an end result if we're open to that idea. And I strongly believe I don't want to be in a room running a company where everyone has had the exact same experiences that I've had, because then I should just be me. Why am I paying all these other people, right? I found so much value. First off, I love getting to know humans as humans, which is one of the reasons for this podcast. And I think that the lens we all view the world through is so uniquely our own that bringing people who've had different experiences allows you to see problems ahead of time, allows you to see different solutions. It increases your creativity. It increases also your ability to build a community within yourself, within your organization as well, that's a diverse. So I'm a big believer in that. I think once again, it manifests in how you actually implement it, just like everything else. So great systems can be great systems, but if they're poorly implemented, they're a disaster. And I think that's the piece, is us constantly getting back to the core of where the value is and sticking to the value and trying to align what we're doing to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all fine. I mean, there was an argument to be made to be these things to be forced at some point, and there were general agreement about that probably when that happened, in form of showing it in election results and who is going to be in charge. And okay, we want that. Now we tested it. We think it can be corrected a little bit. I mean, it's all fine. I mean, whoever did it was doing the right thing. Whoever is thinking that we should modify it is doing the right thing. Nothing is perfect, but direction of where we are going, I'm very optimistic. I'm very pro this country and what's happening. I think our founding fathers did a very good job of building this structure. Love Benjamin Franklin. I don't know how much you know about him, but it's crazy guy, Renaissance man of his time, and the way that they were thinking about things. So I think foundation, we get nervous about, the system is being tested. The system should be tested.
It should be tested.
It should be tested.
So the thing I was thinking is, the thing I love about what's come out from this is that it has given the opportunity also for people to be educated about what it really is. Because at some point, some individuals or some implementations are just like, we're doing check boxes and we're having to fulfill these check boxes. So we're really not being inclusive, or we're not having any equity because we're doing this, right? And so I think by pressure testing it as well is to go in and say, wait, are we really being equitable? Are we really being inclusive?
That's right.
And are we not? And to help the world really understand what that means and why there's value in it when, placed appropriately.
That's right. I mean, the other analogy that's actually a common theme of all the things that we are talking about, U.S. is also like a startup.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
Very much a startup. In fact, I think purple estates, because we are talking a little bit about politics, are the frontier of the startup, because that's where all of the collision is happening. Mm-hmm. And that's where you can have novel ideas. That's where you can say things that, like we are talking about, there's a socialistic and there's a capitalistic, and maybe let's figure out a way to marry them, and there's a university and there's pharma, right?
Right.
And yes, you can have this conversation everywhere, but maybe you can act on it, because this is... So the fact that we are experimenting as a country, it's a beauty and the secret weapon of this country. to figure things out. And I think it's all good.
Yeah. I think that another piece that I hope to get out of this is more individuals at some point being willing to just listen to different ideas
That's right.
and experiment. And I love the word, like when I'm building companies, I love the word experiment. Like, look, we're going to experiment with testing, with Biolocity. We're experimenting with some different things, right? It may work. And if so, that's great. It may not. And we're going to say, okay, never mind. We're never going to do that again. But you will never know. You'll never get to those great things that really change unless you pressure test things and experiment things. Okay.
That's a very American thing, by the way.
To what?
This way of thinking
Oh,
about
yeah,
things, right?
yeah.
Like that you have resources and a mindset and acceptance from the larger society to experiment and figure things out. Venture capital is an American thing. You can't find this kind of really
Right.
high risk, large capitals for things that might actually not work. There's a power law in venture capital that 90% of things is a very high dispersion between things that
Right.
will work and not work, but you would take that chance, and I think that's why we have great things here.
And that's also why great things end up costing a lot of money to actually get to it, because you have to have more shots on goal. And you have to be, maybe what we were talking about, the liberal arts of analyzing things to be able to try and determine. But every VC I know will tell you about the thing they invested in they thought was going to be amazing that totally tanked, and the investment that they passed on. And I try and tell like the teams that we're evaluating, I say to them, like, look, here's the deal. I'm not sure that we're picking the 5 best teams, for example. Like you have to make a decision at some point. But we could pass on a team that ends up being amazing, and then I'll be like, oh, I can't believe we passed on that team. But you have to, understand that it is a numbers game. It is also being able to put in the right resources, the right experience, the right ability to pivot, the right collaborators. So I think that when we're talking about trying to build more of that in Atlanta, because I know you and I are both interested in this in the Atlanta ecosystem, how do you think we accomplish that?
So I think definitely one component, it's good opportunity to talk about EBFI also and
Yeah, let's do it.
Biolocity
Yeah.
and how I'm thinking. So people ask me, you were in academia and then you become a founder and then you went back to academia and then you started this venture studio, Emory Biofoundry Institute at Emory, and now on the LP side endowment. Like these are they relevant or not? It's a very actually nice arc in a natural evolution of what I've been thinking about, right? Like I see an enormous amount of scientific infrastructure, intellectual potential in university that's untapped. And you can argue that funding is lacking. You can argue that's why I wanted to figure out how Silicon Valley actually happened.
Oh, yeah.
Is it a funding? Is it
a chicken and egg
what I
kind of
call
thing?
learned from Dennis Lockhart, previous chair of Atlanta Fed. He told me mezzanine level managers, so I want to credit him for that term. I'm using it a lot.
How would you define a mezzanine level?
The mezzanine level managers are the people are coming out right after your scientific co-founders, right?
Okay.
Like they have a better understanding of what's beyond the rest of that 90% we talked about, right?
Like
So-
market potential
and they need to be like the
access
super
and-
executors.
Right.
Maybe when the company, if we want to take it to public market, maybe it requires a different kind of executives.
Right.
But at least, knowing beyond in development stage, at least that's my definition. I should ask him
Okay.
how he thinks about things. But so that's one thing we are doing. And by the way, all the things I'm discussing here, and maybe I should have said this in the beginning, all my personal opinion,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So it's because I have involvement with Emory Endowment, which is 12 billion, getting between 11 to 12 billion, depending on the day, endowment. And obviously we have opinions about things and venture and role of university, etc. And there is a dynamic, we talk internally about these
Right.
things. These are very strong opinions about certain things, a strong opinion loosely held. Would love it to be challenged, but I think one thing that we can do here in Atlanta, and we are doing, your organization and Emory Biofoundry, and we have a drug fund also at Emory, and a bunch of other things. We had a leadership that was supporting this, and I think was a very excellent move. We'll see the fruit of this in a few years. that we basically enable everything that we discussed today, right? Like we try to make these organization kind of a bridge between industry, venture capital world, pharma,
Yes.
medtech, and universities, um, and provide funding, provide know-how, um, to educate the faculty on one side, and then provide them with adequate support. We are not writing small checks. This is the Emory Biofoundry and Emory Drug Development Fund are true seed capital, kind of, you can argue in some cases, Series A level check sizes for these technologies to get to the next value inflection point. So we secure the funding, at least for some time. Hopefully we would deliver, and then we'll get more support from university leaderships and also other folks in Atlanta that care about the future of the city and how we can go beyond real estate, right? Like there are a
Right.
bunch. I saw a sign actually, which I'm thinking about. I'm getting goosebumps. Last night when I was on my way to this event, 85, just past Georgia Tech, there was a sign saying, "You see a lot of Fortune 500 companies around here, huh? It's not an accident. Georgia Tech." I was like, oh my God, I love it.
Oh, I
Like
got chill
whoever
bumps.
was
Yeah.
behind us.
Right.
So, and I think so there is that support, and there is that potential also here. Um, Truly, I think these are great universities. So we have the talent, we have now funding also, and our model is we have a network of, I don't know, by this point, close to 50 people. And we just started last year. We were going through the process of developing it for a few years, but we got our funding last year. We connected to these individuals across the country that they are subject matter experts. They help us with our due diligence process. Like we go through a due diligence process.
Right.
Like this is not grants. This is not, we think about, I was deliberate about this to think about return on investment.
Yeah.
Because if you think about return on investment, it's I mean, all at the end of the day, it's nonprofit.
Right.
But if you use that as a lens, then you become very singular, and things, you have the right metrics to figure out if you're delivering or not. Anyway, so I think using that to tell you a little bit about my philosophy behind Emory Biofoundry and how I think the Emory innovation ecosystems in universities should be, they should think about return on investment. And so we are using all of these expansive network of people to help us with things. And eventually I'm hoping that some of these people, when they're visiting Atlanta, they see all of these beautiful houses and nice restaurants we have, and how easy it was to fly to Atlanta. I had 12 choices in one day, and some of them start converting and staying here, and then we will have the critical mass of that mezzanine level operators.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I think real institutional capital beyond university, again, my personal opinion, would follow. Do we need to have Sandhill Road in Atlanta first, or the operators and executors? I think you need to have the university, which we have, the talent. Like you can't just make things up, right? Like you need to have something.
Right.
So we have that.
Right.
We have the leadership support and the whole mindset, and we just need to bring those people here, and then the rest would follow. That's my hypothesis.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, also a little difference of what Emory Biofoundry is versus what Biolocity is, where we write small checks. They are non-dilutive checks. But what I tell people is that is not the beauty of what Biolocity is. The beauty is the project management that we do, driving them every 2 weeks towards, we're commercializing, we're going towards a killer experiment, we're going to embrace a pivot as quickly as possible. And I see that even of the teams that we're working with, when we're evaluating teams, I'm thinking about return on investment. Return on investment to me is follow-on funding, getting it to FDA cleared, getting to those different pieces. Those all fall into my return on investment. And I also think a return on investment, because I love the education piece of it, is that some of these that go through this, what they're working on right now may not be successful. But if I've done a good job, then what they've learned in the period of time working with us sets them up to be much more successful the second time they try something or the third time they try something, and really help them have that kind of educational shift within their head to drive in a way that's going to drive towards success.
I love that. And I was thinking about that, you know, if Biolocity only accomplishes that, right? Like we were talking about that cultural element, education element, that like, look, there's a lot that needs to be done. You don't believe me? Let's do it together.
Right.
And you see all of the, oh my God. I mean, there's so many other things that I had no idea I need to know about and be able to execute on. So if Biolocity does that, the return on investment is going to be there. And again, I don't, being maybe a little bit deliberate about this capitalistic part of it, not just because I think the whole, it's a good way of measuring things, and it's a good way to having successful translation.
Right.
And the whole idea of this is evil, or I think that's a wrong mindset. To be honest, that's what I'm trying to advocate for. We are doing this because we want to have successful translation.
Right.
If you don't think about return on investment, all of your other stakeholders that's going to fund this are thinking about that.
Exactly.
If you don't think about it, then you're going to have misalignment from the get-go. And so just fix that. And then we can donate it.
I watched a team that was evaluating projects at a university for funding. And it was the big piece of that mindset difference between us was huge. And it was funding versus keeping a grad student in a lab, or some of these type. Or my perspective is funding towards, no, I'm driving towards commercialization. And if you're working with me for a year and halfway through the year and you're like off dilly-dallying and not doing the stuff that we have the ability to bring back the funds and not continue to fund that as well. Because once again, one of my favorite phrases is everything you say yes to means you're saying no to something else. And you have to choose those yeses wisely and put the money and the funds into those pieces too. And then I also tell the teams, like, look, here's the deal, especially when they push back, like I want them to practice something, or heaven forbid, I want them to do more customer discovery, right? And they get frustrated because they're the experts in this field. And I say, okay, here's the deal. You do realize that if you guys are successful, and I don't know, maybe you have a yacht one day. I'm not going to have a yacht, okay? All I'm going to ask is that you donate money back to Biolocity so I can help. I'm not getting any piece of that puzzle. So I really just love having, and I think in our ecosystem, going back to our university question or things like that, I strongly believe we need more mechanisms that are results metric driven towards success that are being held accountable. And then when you see those ROIs, putting more gas on the fire on those programs that are doing that, versus funding a whole bunch of things, but not actually giving them the skills, resources, and things that need to be successful.
That's right. And it takes time. I mean, that's another educational piece that needs to be provided to leadership. Even when you are an investor in a fund outside, private fund, usually those agreements are not 2, 3, 4 years.
Right.
10, 11, 12 years. Sometimes they extend it a few years. And when we are talking about this kind of early stage involvement, it takes time. So be patient. Make sure that you have the right people there.
Yeah.
Obviously, you need to figure out a way to evaluate if they are the right people. So, I mean, we can talk about how to evaluate that, but you need to come up with some sort of, I would say, proxy, surrogate, endpoint, success points to assess things, and then wait and see what happens and be supportive, because this is kind of a disruption that, in my opinion, has to happen.
Yeah,
and
I
it's
agree.
going to have a lot of headwind without being empowered and enabled. It would be very tough. We're not going to give up, because I really believe, like, we are going to do things regardless, but it would be nice to get support.
We'll be part of the 60 under 60, maybe. I did this painting probably about 15 years ago. And, it's the quote from League of Our Own. If it was hard, everyone would do it. Or if it was easy, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
yeah. And so my mentality on leaving a legacy or something like that is I'm pretty much guaranteeing at this stage I'm never going to have a mansion anywhere. I'm never going to have like 5 houses around the world.
I don't know.
I might, but that's not what my success looks like, right? But by being able to participate in all these different companies, the cascade effect of those impacts that you and I are having are one day, grandchildren and great-grandchildren from now. I will tell you this. Do you know something that's kind of cool about me and my history and why I love just entrepreneurship and engineering is my great-grandfather was an engineer, and he was one of the individuals on the original patent for torpedoes.
Oh, you mentioned that,
Yes.
I think, one time.
And I should have warned them
Wow.
when my grandmother just passed away, and at some stage they had gotten a necklace and earrings that are torpedoes. I'm like, how nerdy and cool is that, right? But thinking about just also once
The impact
again,
of that.
I'm sorry?
The impact of that. Sorry.
Yeah, the impact that all, and I think sometimes when I think of a leader, I do think you can have a lot of different leaders in an organization, and they lead in different areas, and they have different perspectives, and I think that you have one overall leader, and that's driving the whole mission, vision, and that piece of the company. But I think that each of us can be leaders and managers of our own lives. And we can get the things done for the present, and then also think about the impact we want to have
Absolutely.
for the future. Okay, so as we wind down, what do you want to make sure that the audience remembers from today?
Oh my God.
To talk to your ChatGPT.
Talk to your ChatGPT more. No, look, we do these kind of conversations, and I'm grateful for your invitation. I think it was good that we talk about different subjects. Expanding, being intellectually curious and open-minded to discuss things like this. I think this is a beauty of where we are, and time-wise and location-wise. So I think maybe the meta-level conclusion here is there were a bunch of different things, some of them novel, some of them I don't agree with, but that's why we are having these kind of platforms, and
Yep.
That's the main thing that I like them to take, and know that interesting things happening here. And again, we care about Atlanta because of Georgia Tech, but these things can be replicated anywhere. In fact, I'm getting calls from colleagues from other places, brand name places, that we like what's happening there, and you guys figure it out, because there are challenges on how to establish these kind of organizations beyond the scope of this talk. We'll need to dedicate another one to it.
Yep.
But there's a nonprofit organization, then you have people, and how you're going to bring people from outside. Anyway, so we did all of that, and I just want folks to know that a lot's happening, and I'm involved with a bunch of efforts. I would love to hear their opinions about how we are doing things, but there's a lot of conviction and passion and support on very innovative ideas, and I think we'll see the fruit of that very soon. I'm very hopeful.
Yep. I'm very helpful. Well, and I also did my trip out to Silicon Valley, and what I tell people about that is that being a biomedical engineer, it's kind of the same thing if you're let's just say a country music singer. You think you need to go to Nashville to record country music, and then you get there and you realize I can record country music anywhere. And I had the same. I went to California and Silicon Valley, and because I thought as a biomedical engineer, that's where I needed to be. And I came back to Atlanta because of the grit, the determination, and the ecosystem here that I think is bar none just absolutely amazing.
We were at Beltline last night, and it's amazing. You see the diversity of people. You see all of, Anyway, I don't want to. We know all the good things about Atlanta, but to your point, this is a good environment to experiment with some of these ideas.
Yep.
because you have different kind of both sides opinions about things, and then you can, through that conflict, something new would emerge, in my opinion.
Yep.
And this is an opportunity for us to experiment and be pioneers.
Yep.
And then others would follow, and we will help them.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, a requirement of this podcast is that everyone share their favorite motivational quote. So which one are you going to share with us today?
So I think we covered one quote, but that's not very much motivational. The best way to predict future is to create it.
I love that. I love that. Wow.
I'm very much into a business of crystal balls these days, right? Like, how can I see even 5 days, a week, months, in case of, long-term investments, years? You need to play a role, and then the probability of what you're predicting actually happening is going to be higher.
Yep.
So that's how I think about things.
Well, thank you for joining me today.
Of
Thank
course.
you absolutely for putting badass into this episode. I appreciate it. And as a reminder, as Nassir said, the opinions we shared today are our own and do not represent those of any university or organization mentioned during this podcast. So
Yes.
Thank you for listening, participating, and absolutely share in the comments things that if you disagree with everything that we said, go for it. Share it in the comments. Let us know your thoughts. We'll be looking forward to it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me for today's episode of the Badass Leaders Podcast. To hear more interviews with industry experts and learn how to grow your career and leadership potential, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to ensure you do not miss future episodes. This podcast is a production of the AGN Group. To learn more about the AGN Group, visit our website at theagnGroup.com. There, you can discover more about our services, which include hosting workshops, management consulting, brand strategy, keynote speaking, and more. Follow us on all social media channels shown on the screen and displayed in the show notes. And until next week, be brave and be badass.